Good evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to my evening news report right here on the Riley King Network. Take a look at this photo right here. George Floyd protests across America. Let's begin. As you know, all across the nation, protests spread due to George Floyd. What you need to know right now. Protests over the death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man at the hands of police in Minneapolis, Minnesota, entered its 8th day across the U.S. One former officer charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter, but prosecutors are believe the charges isn't harsh enough. President Trump vowed yesterday to use the military if widespread violence isn't quelled, as peaceful protests just outside the White House gates were dispersed with tear gas. Experts hired by George Floyd's family and the Hennepin County Medical Examiner have concluded his death was a homicide. Also, Trump turning holy ground into a photo op is a Serengil Revend says. Reverend, the rector at St. John's Church in Georgetown, said she was at the scene when police fired tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowd so that the president could walk over to the church and take photos. She said she was shocked when the police fired tear gas on protesters, but was more offended that Trump turned the holy ground into a photo op. "25 Philadelphia police officers injured in protest," commissioner says. 25 Philadelphia police officers have been injured in a protest so far, police commissioner said Tuesday. The police commissioner did not elaborate on the type of severity of the officers' injuries. Philadelphia mayor said the group of people armed with bats in the city were eventually dispersed by police, but that he was not happy about how long it took for that to happen. Here are the cities that have imposed curfews Tuesday night in the U.S. California, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, San Francisco, and Oakland. District of Columbia, New York City, in Ohio, in Cleveland. Justice official Barr told authorities to clear protesters near the White House. Minutes ahead of President Trump's televised address from the Rose Garden Monday evening, Attorney General William Barr ordered authorities to clear a crowd of protesters that had gathered nearby, according to the Justice Department officials said. Barr and other top officials from agencies responsible for securing the White House had previously planned to secure a wider perimeter around Lafayette Park, a federally owned green space just north of the building, in response to fires and destruction caused by protesters on Sunday night. That plan would have cleared the area later used for the president's walk to a nearby church for a photo op, by 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the official said. But it never happened. When Barr arrived at Lafayette Park just after 6 p.m. in a scene that was captured on news camera and echoed hecklers from the large, peaceful crowd, Barr saw things in that area had not been emptied and told police to clear the area, the officials said. If federal law enforcement was met with resistance by the protesters, crowd control measures should be implemented, Barr had said, according to officials. Barr had been told that police believed protesters were gathering rocks to throw at law enforcement, and while he was in the park, water bottles were thrown in his direction, the official said. CNN did not witness any water bottles being thrown at the Attorney General. Camera footage shows him standing and watching the crowd for several minutes, frankled by security detail and 2 senior department officials. Just before 6:24 p.m., police broadcast their first warning for the crowd to distance. A CNN correspondent reporting from the rooftop of a nearby hotel heard 3 warning broadcasts over the next 10 minutes as authorities moved closer to the crowd. At 6:35 p.m., authorities began charging the crowd to lockstep with their shields raised, some using their batons to strike the protesters as gas canisters were deployed. What the protests look like across the U.S. Protesters are marching through cities across the U.S. over the death of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here's what protests look like. Take a look. Here is what New York City protests look like. Washington, D.C. protest. Los Angeles protest. Houston protest. That is what some of the protests look like around the United States. Minneapolis Police Department to undergo civil rights investigation. The Minnesota Police Department of Human Rights is launching a civil rights investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department, the state's governor announced Tuesday today. The investigation will look into practices of the department for the last 10 years. According to the release from the governor's office, the investigation will look to see if Minneapolis police have engaged in systematic discriminatory practices targeting people of color. And that does it for this evening news report on the latest of the George Floyd protest spread nationwide. Thank you for watching this evening news report. Have a great evening. I'll see you back here tomorrow with more news reports. Good night and bye, everyone.